But God demonstrated his own love toward us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Much more then, having now been justified by his blood, we shall be saved from the wrath of God through him. For if while we were enemies, we were reconciled to God through the death of his Son, much more, having been reconciled, we shall be saved by his life. And not only this, but we also exult in God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we have now received the reconciliation. You may be seated. Tonight, lest I hold you too long, I simply have been looking amongst the newscast that has been going forth this week, looking at the state of our nation, dealing with young people, especially in this new generation. You have to understand what they desire. You have to understand what they look for and what they need. And above all else, as I surveyed the surveyors and asked the questionnaires what young people in this day and time desire more than all else, it's to be loved and accepted. I didn't get an amen there. What our children, your children, desire more than anything else is to be loved and accepted. So tonight, if you allow me a brief moment of your time and attention, I simply want to talk about real love. Real love. If I could use a subtopic or a subtitle, I'd use this one. Some of y'all might be familiar with the saying, say it with your chest. I heard a few laughs there, so I'm still y'all watch Kevin Hart. Say it with your chest. If you don't mind, for call and response purposes, find a neighbor in close proximity to you, look them in the face, look them in the eyes, smile at them and say, neighbor, preacher's gonna preach about real love. Amen. Real love. What does it mean to have real love? Why is there a question of real love? How, in fact, do you measure real love? If I could pick your minds for a second, one might assume that you would measure real love based on how many times someone says, I love you. But if you are in a home where somebody says, I love you, and yet abuses you, you do not experience real love. One may also assume that one experiences real love by the times that people say, I love you. And then if you are in an area where the people who say they love you treat you as if they hate you and talk about you behind your back, you will not experience real love. Maybe a third time you have heard someone say the phrase, I love you. But then maybe you have a circle of friends who only act like your friend when they're in your face. Then it is then when you will say that you have not yet experienced real love. Maybe that hasn't gotten on your road. Maybe this one will. Maybe you judge how much you experience or measure real love by the likes you get on Instagram.
Thank you.
But yet I found out that even when I have large numbers of likes on Instagram, there are those posts where I have few, and so I really can't say that I experience real love from Instagram. Maybe you experience real love, as you say, from how many followers or friends you have on Facebook. But when you're in trouble, when you need someone to talk to, when you're down and out, when your car is on flat, when your stomach is empty, when your head is full of thoughts and your eyes are full of tears and they're not there for you, have you really experienced real love?
Come over here, word, preach.
Tonight, I just want to talk about real love. Kids these days, they don't like all the hooping and hollering. They don't get it. They don't understand it. So those who came for the hooping and the hollering, if you can hold on to the end, I try to add you a little something in there, but this is for them.
Come on with the
And
special.
so because this is for them, I just want to talk to them because they need to understand what real love looks like. As we introduce this particular text, this particular book of the Bible, this epistle or letter, pastoral letter, is written by a young man named Paul. Paul, for you theologians, Paul is simply a man who was originally named Saul. He was from a city named Tarshish. He was a Jew by birth. He was a member of the tribe of Benjamin by lineage. He was a Roman by citizenship. He was a Pharisee by education. He was a persecutor of the Church of Jesus Christ by choice. And yet, in style, he was a tent maker by trade. And even in his persecuting of the Church of Christ, even in his criticism of Christ's followers, Paul had a changed life. Because the Bible tells us that one day, as he was heading down the Damascus road to persecute some more folks, that Jesus knocked him off his high horse, and a bright light from heaven shone as bright as the sun. And as he looked up, he could only hear the voice of Jesus saying, "Saul, why persecutest thou me?" And he said, "Listen, I just need you to stop persecuting me and start preaching for me." So Saul gets up and his name is transformed to Paul, because now he has to become little. Saul means somebody who is tall. And Paul in the Greek simplifies someone who is small. The reason that is important and his name was changed from Saul to Paul is because in order to be a servant of God, you can't be bigger than God. In order for people to see Jesus through you, you have to be able to look past or over you so they can see Jesus. And my brothers and sisters, as I've surveyed the church, I found out that the issue with the 21st century church is not that Jesus is not there, but that the church has gotten bigger than God.
Wow.
Too many times we cannot see Jesus during the ceremonial hour of the singing of songs because the worship leader performs instead of praises. Too many times we cannot see Jesus for the ushers when they come in because we cannot see the love of Jesus from the hatred that the ushers show on their face. Sometimes we cannot even see Jesus in his glory because we're too busy watching the choir walk down the aisle. Sometimes even my brothers and sisters, I found out that we cannot even see Jesus from the pulpit because the preacher has gotten too big.
You're right.
God deliver us from celebrity mentality, where we've gotten so big that you can't see God. But here in this text, Paul writes to the Romans because here he's writing to about 50,000 people who believe in God and have been dispersed from Jerusalem. Here they are believing in God, but he writes not only to those who do believe, but to those who don't believe. And he writes for this reason. He writes to the church at Rome because he wants them to experience a unified church. Because there were Jews who believed in Rome and there were Gentiles who believed in Rome, and they didn't worship together. They worked apart from each other. They worked divided from each other. And Paul says, listen, in order to show the glory of God, the Jew and the Gentile have to work together. In order to show the glory of God, the choir members and the musicians have to work together. In order to show the glory of God, the preacher and the deacons got to work together. In order to show the glory of God, one side of the church got to work along with the other side of the church. He says the reason folks aren't experiencing love in the world is not because Jesus is not loving, but because the people who are supposed to look like him don't show love. And so here he writes in the first part of the text in chapter number 5. He starts out his words in verse 1. He says, therefore, having been justified by faith, we have peace with God. I like that you read the text too fast because you missed out on a very particular word. You missed out on what we English scholars call a preposition. A preposition is a word that starts out in a phrase that tells you why something is about to happen later. He literally says, therefore, and that's the preposition therefore, means that therefore is there for a reason, and you have to go back before the therefore to find out what therefore was there for. That was for you scholars. Now, let me put it this way. If you see the word therefore written down, you always have to look back before you get to that word to find out why that word is there. Simple enough for you? So, before we can start into this particular letter of Paul, we have to understand why this portion has been written. Chapter number 1 of the book of Romans, we find out that Paul speaks of the wrath of God and heaven against all ungodly people. In chapter number 2, God is shown as being impartial, not having any favor or any exclusive love to a Jew or a Gentile, saved or unsaved. In chapter number 3, we find out that everybody is guilty. In chapter number 3, in the latter portion, we also find out that God says that there is not one righteous person on the earth. No, not even one of us.
That's right.
Notice I said not even one of us, which means even amongst the pulpit there is no righteous person. Even amongst the trustees, the laborers, there are no righteous people. Why do you say that? Because the Bible says that for we have all sinned and come short of the glory of God. And so he says in chapter number 3 that there is no righteousness in any of us. That all the world is guilty, and because we're all guilty in front of a righteous God, that we'll all experience God's judgment. Now, just in case you're not sure what God's judgment is, the Bible tells us clearly that the wages of sin is death. Which means that as we stand before a righteous God, unrighteous and ungodly people, we have a death sentence placed over our lives. But as if it were a line of demarcation, he shifts his gaze in chapter number 3, verse 21, and he says, but there is justification through faith. Some of y'all didn't catch that. I'll give it to you again just in case you didn't catch it. He starts out in chapter number 1 talking about the wrath of God. In chapter number 2, he talks about how God is impartial and will not slant his judgment toward anyone else. In chapter number 3, he begins by talking about how we all are doomed to die. But as if it were a line of demarcation, he shifts his gaze in chapter number 3, verse 21 to signify that even though there's all that bad news, but is a conjunction which means that it's about to negate or deflect everything that happened before it and change in a different direction. He says, listen, you and I are all both on our way to a devil's hell, but there's hope.
All right, come on now, come on.
All right. Young people, I need you to understand that, listen, I know we can talk about all the fancy things in life, but just because you're young don't mean you'll live a long life. I've had friends to pass away standing in the club while I watch someone's face get blown off of their shoulders. I've been sitting on a band practice field getting a call that my cousin, who was the same age of me in the 6th grade, had died in a car accident. Just because you are young don't mean that you will live forever, but after you die there is a place where you will live forever, and that's either heaven or hell. So before you go, I need to make sure you know about real love. See, we don't talk about that enough in church, that there is an either or. There's not a both. You can't be in heaven and in hell. You got to pick one. Notice I said you got to. You'll catch that in a minute. When you wake up in the morning, young people, most times if mama and daddy allow you to, you go in your closet and you decide out of all the clothes you want to wear, which one you decide to wear today. Well, you usually look at the Weather Channel, or mama will say that it's cold outside, so instead of picking the short sleeve shirt, you'll go pick the hoodie. But then summertime rolls around, and then you'll decide that because it's not cold anymore, you'll wear the shorts and the tank tops, and you have to pick which one you're going to wear. Well, just like this, he says, listen, there's all this bad news coming, and you and I are destined for a devil's hell, but we can pick whether we go or not. How do we pick? Because the justification that he reads in chapter number 3, verse 21, and through the chapter verse number 4, he literally says you can choose to go to heaven or hell. All you got to do is have faith. Faith is an unwavering belief, or faith is a type of trust that no matter what anybody says, no matter what anybody thinks, you have faith that God said it is and that it is. In other words, the Bible speaks of it as faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Listen, he literally wants you to know that you can go to heaven or you can go to hell. The difference in heaven and hell is this. Heaven is a place where you'll never be hungry again. Heaven is a place where you'll never be thirsty again. Heaven is a place where you'll never cry tears of sorrow again. Heaven is a place where you'll never lose any of your loved ones again. Heaven is a place where you'll never feel any more aches and pains. Heaven is a place where you'll never walk around with a smile or with a frown on your face. Heaven is a place where you'll never be depressed, stressed, broke, busted, and disgusted. Heaven is a place where everyone ought to want to go. But to the flip side, the other side of that coin is hell, an eternal pit where you suffer all day, every day, 24/7, 365 for the rest of eternity. Reliving your worst memories, feeling your worst pains, living your worst sorrows, crying tears that won't seem to quench the burn. Hell is a place where you're desperate for hope, but hope is lost. And you have the choice of what you believe in. And so the question is, if we're supposed to have faith, preacher, what am I supposed to believe in to get me to heaven and not to hell? Paul literally says you have to believe in the sacrificial death of Jesus.
That's it.
That's it. That's it. You have to believe in the sacrificial death of Jesus. Young people say sacrificial. Sacrificial is a big word meaning the process of being sacrificed. Sacrifice means taking something that belongs to you and giving it up so someone else can benefit.
Come on now. Come on now. Come on. Break it down. Come on now.
Okay. Sacrifice means that like your mama and your dad, they sometimes will sacrifice themselves for you.
Come on now.
What do you mean they sacrifice themselves for me? Because even though you don't know it, sometimes mama and daddy will wear the same clothes for 3 to 4 years at a time while you walk around in a new outfit every week. Sometimes mama and daddy will go without the necessary things they need so you can have your hair and your nails done looking good. Sometimes mama and daddy will go with the old raggedy flip phone so you can walk around with an iPhone 7. Listen, sometimes mama and daddy have to sacrifice, giving up something they could use for themselves, but loving you enough to use it on you. Y'all missed that right there. He literally says that all you have to do is believe in the sacrificial death of Jesus. In other words, he's saying believe that God could have allowed Jesus to stay in heaven, never go through any suffering, never go through any sinful treatment. Any time that he came because God loved you enough to send him.
Say that. Say that.
That's all I have tonight. I don't want to talk about nothing big and theological. I simply want to talk about real love. Watch the text. The text says, that's a holding too long. In verse 6, it says, for while we were still helpless,
Come on now.
at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. First thing we see in the text, the first proof of real love we see is the timing of Christ's love.
Yes, sir.
The timing of Christ's love. Somebody say timing.
Timing.
Watch the text. You missed it. The text says, for while. At the same time. While. During our process. While. In the midst of us. While. In spite of us. While. You catch it now. No matter what we did. While. No matter how we thought, There you go. No matter how much we sinned, while, no matter how bad of a shape the world was in, while. Watch what he says. For while we were yet helpless.
Yes, sir.
In other words, while we couldn't help ourselves.
Yeah.
You know, because some things that are bad, it just feels good. You know you shouldn't lie, but you know, you just want to get out of trouble so you don't have to get a whooping. So it feels good to just tell that little lie so you don't have to worry about getting a whooping while you were helpless and couldn't help yourself.
Come on with it. Hallelujah.
At the right time, Christ died.
Wow.
Oh, okay, that didn't catch y'all. Let me help some of y'all that some of y'all older ones that give an amen. While you were tipping and dipping, ducking and dodging, while you were in the wrong place at the wrong time, doing the wrong thing with the wrong folks, while you did, Christ died. Oh, okay, maybe that ain't some of y'all. Okay. While you couldn't help yourself. And the reason he says helpless, he says, because Paul literally says this, he said, every time I try or want to do right, evil is always present. He said, every time I desire to do the right thing, sometimes I just happen to end up doing the wrong thing. Even though I know what's right, even though I've been trained into what's right, even though I know how to do it the right way, sometimes I don't do it the right way. My friend would say, even though I know the GPS says go right,
Come on now.
sometimes I just go left. The young folk would say, you went left on me, but he literally says this. He says, while we were going left when we should have been going right, Christ loved us enough at the right time to die for us. Now that was the first part of the timing. The while was the first part of the timing, but the second part was right time. Meaning there could have been a wrong time. Meaning that there could have been another time that he chose. So the question is, why did Jesus die when he died? And why did he get up when he got up? Let's look before what happened. If Jesus had died before the Romans took over Israel, he would have been stoned to death.
Come on. All right.
If Jesus had died in a medieval period,
I hear your context, Reverend.
he would have been hanged to death.
Yeah.
If Jesus had died in another place, living amongst another people, he would have been drowned to death. That ain't enough for you. If Jesus lived in our day and time, he more than likely would have been shot to death.
All right, you got that right.
Okay, y'all don't know nobody like that. But watch, he died at this particular time before this particular moment. The Romans loved this process of crucifixion. Now let me explain what crucifixion was. Crucifixion is a big $3 word that says they made a really big cross, took a beam of wood, stretched it high, stretched it wide. And the reason Jesus died at that time was because the text said, if I be lifted up.
That's it.
Y'all look clean over there. He said, if I be lifted up, I'll draw all men unto me. Watch. If he had been shot to death, he would have fallen to the ground. If he had been drowned, he would have fallen to the depths of the sea. If he had been hanged, he would have fallen till his neck broke. If he had simply been stoned, he would have been stoned until his body went limp and he fell on the ground. But he literally says, if I be lifted up from the ground, that's how I'm going to get you. That's how I'm going to get your family. That's how I'm going to get your children, your co-workers, your classmates. In order for me to reach back from one area of time and grab you from there, reach back to to the future time, grab your great-great-grandchildren who ain't even born yet in their sins and save them. In order for me to do that, I got to hang on the cross. The timing was right. The timing of Christ's love. But watch this. Not only the timing didn't get you, that didn't make you feel Christ-like love. Watch this. In order for timing to be right, real love says it might be inconvenient.
Wow. Preacher.
Wait. When your mom and dad sacrifice something for you, sometimes it comes at an inconvenience to themselves. In other words, they sometimes go without something.
Yes.
So you can have something, but that sometimes means that they're going to be lacking in other areas.
Okay. All right.
The entire Godhead, all three parts of the Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Ghost, were all seated together in heaven. And the Father went lacking of his Son.
Yes.
You come on with it.
Preacher.
It came at an inconvenience to him. Because, watch, you like giving to people who give to you.
That's right.
But what about people who don't like you? What about people who you know don't like you?
Come on now.
What about people who cuss you out, start rumors about you, criticize you behind your back? It's hard loving them kind of folk. But at an inconvenience to himself.
Wow.
Even when we didn't love him. Y'all don't know what it's at. Even when you wasn't thinking about God, even when you wasn't praying to God, somehow God allowed grace and mercy to come over your life. It was an inconvenience to him, but a blessing to you. I dare somebody to praise God for his time. All right. The timing of Christ. Secondly, let's not hold you too long. Verses 7 and 8 reads as thus: For one will hardly die for a righteous man.
Come on.
Though perhaps for a good man someone might. But God demonstrated his love toward us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Okay. The timing was this: while we were helpless, Christ died. He came at a time when we couldn't help ourselves. We couldn't save ourselves, so he came so that we could be saved. But after the timing of Christ's love, you see the demonstration of real love.
Yes.
Watch the text. The text says, watch, someone might die for a good person, but no one is going to die for a bad person.
Say that.
Okay, let me sit in here laughing. Young people, that bully you at school. If the principal called and said, somebody got to get suspended from school, would you say, don't suspend them, suspend me, even if they done treated you wrong?
You know the answer, right?
Grocery store owners, the thief that stole all your product.
Come on now.
If the judge says somebody got to go to jail, somebody going to jail today, would you say, leave him alone and take me? You'll catch it in a minute. The person that talk about you like a dog, if somebody got to get exposed for all the mess that they ever been done, would you say, take me instead and leave them alone?
You right.
There's a story. I'm going to tell you a story. Watch this. There's a story of a group that crusaded through Egypt. Now, if you've ever studied Egypt or the lands of the Middle East, you'll find out that there are huge sand dunes. And it's very dry. It's a desert. It's very hard to breathe in those kind of conditions. And so they all were riding on camels. And as they were riding, one of the leaders said, wait, where's James? And they looked back and they said, James is not on his camel. Well, is somebody going to go back to find him? He must have been taken off by the wind. He must have gone crazy by the mirages. He must have starved to death because there's no food. He must have been thirsting to death because there's no water. He must have just passed out. Is anybody going to go back to look for James?
Come on.
Well, one person said, well, James was a murderer. Another person said, well, James lied. Another one said, well, James was mean. Another one said, well, James was constantly hurting someone else.
Wow.
Another said, James didn't even believe in God.
All right, come on now.
And he said, well, is anybody going to go back for him? No, James ain't worth it. So they keep riding on. Don't know where James is. James is left in the desert by himself.
Tell your story, Reverend.
But one man stops. His name was Alex. And he said, this is not right. I haven't been the best person, so I got to go find James. He turns around, risks his own life to go back and find James.
All right.
When he finds James, James is laid out. He's covered by sand with his hand reaching up. And that's the only way he knew it was him. He couldn't even breathe because he was drowned by the sand and tormented by the sun. He pulled him up, put him on his own camel, rode him back to the group, and somebody turned around and said, hey, there's Alex. He went and got James and risked his own life to do it. Guess what?
Come on.
In the story of spirituality,
Yes, sir.
Come on.
Take your time.
I'm James.
Come on now.
Some of y'all didn't catch that. In the story of spirituality, you're James.
Come on now.
Because you've done something that you're not proud of. You've done something that was wrong. You've done something that was messed up. But in the midst of the devil saying he ain't worth saving, Jesus said, that ain't right. And I got to turn around. I ain't ready yet. I ain't ready. That was the demonstration of his love. Because the text says, while we were yet sinners, Christ demonstrated his love in that he died for us. While we were yet, while in the midst of, while at the same time, while we were still sinning. Every time you sin, Christ died again.
Lord have mercy.
You put another nail in his hand.
Lord.
Another thorn in his head. You put another cross on his back. But guess what? He only physically died one time. How? Because that once was enough because the timing was right. The timing was right. That's the timing. He loved you while you were helpless. The demonstration is he loved you while you were a sinner. And lastly, the results of his love. Here's where you see yourself in the text. Watch this. When you look on Facebook or Instagram and you see your likes, do you benefit from it? Do the likes pay your bills?
Say that now.
Do the hearts on the screen make you feel like everything gonna be all right? Does the number of your friends on Facebook, does it make you feel like there's all sunny days in your life?
Come on, Pastor.
No, because there's no results from likes. Likes don't have results. Love has results. Watch, the text says the results, verses 9 through 11, watch the text, we finna go. He says, much more then, having now been justified by his blood, we shall be saved from the wrath of God through him. For if while we were enemies, we were reconciled through the death of his son, much more having been reconciled, we shall be saved by his life. And not only this, but we exult in God through our Lord Jesus Christ, through whom we have now received the reconciliation. Anytime you're testing love,
yes, sir,
love has results. Real love. Fake love got results too.
You got it.
But real love has lasting results. The text says, watch the text. The text says, Now, much more then, having now been justified.
Yes, sir.
Having now been justified.
All right.
He literally says, by his blood.
Come on.
It was the blood that justified.
Yes, sir.
By his blood, we shall be saved from the wrath of God through him. That didn't shout, y'all. Okay. Some of y'all read it way too fast. Watch. In chapter number 1, Paul says the wrath of God is going towards everyone who is a sinner, who is ungodly and unrighteous. The wrath of God is that you are all die and be perishing eternally in hell. In chapter number 2,
Yes, sir.
he says God is impartial, meaning it doesn't matter if you are a churchgoer or a non-churchgoer. If you don't have faith in God, you too will burn in hell. In chapter number 3, he says there is not one person righteous, not from the pulpit to the back door, to the storefront, to the club, to the Pony Express. Nowhere in this world is there a righteous person.
Come on with it. You
And
right.
all of them are destined for hell.
All right.
Watch. But they were saved from the wrath of God by him. You didn't catch it.
Yes,
Let
sir.
me put it in your lap. God saved you from himself.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Lord.
Okay.
You were saved from the punishment of God by God. The only, let me put it this way. Babies, when you get ready to get in trouble, sometimes mama and them will say, I owe you a whooping.
Yes, sir.
But a few hours will roll on and the whooping never came.
Lord, I thank you.
Not that you didn't deserve the whooping, but grace.
Come on, baby.
Yes, sir.
Not that you could have done anything to get yourself out the whooping, because you still committed the act. But it was the grace. Somebody ought to get happy with the grace. You and I are sinners. And nothing that we could do, nothing, no good deed, no spiritual notion can get us out of hell. But it was nothing but the grace. Big Mama then had a song that said, "Die in the grace of the Lord. I come a long way. Yeah, by the grace of the Lord." I said, I come a long way. But Big Mama would say, I should have been dead, sleeping in my grave. But the Lord, it was by the grace of the Lord that I come a long way. In other words, God said, all of you are destined to die. But I come to tell you that all you have to do is simply believe what you need to believe in. You need to believe that the Lord that was about to cancel your death, he took you, snatched you from hell. How did he do it? Yeah, because one day there was a conference in heaven. God said the world has to burn. The world has to go to hell. The devil showed up and said, yeah, you're right, God. Send them all down to me. And so they had a courtroom situation. And in the courtroom, God was the judge. Oh, yeah. And the devil was the prosecuting attorney. Yeah. And Jesus, Jesus, you are the defense attorney. Let me explain what that means. God was the judge, and what he said had to cancel everything. The devil was the prosecutor, meaning that all the devil want to do is point out everything you done you should have known, every place, oh yeah, everything that you said, that you shouldn't have said, everybody you hurt, that you shouldn't have hurt, but Jesus, he's the defense attorney, let me show you what he does. Every time the devil said, where had this sin, Jesus will step right up and he said, yeah, you're right, but I paid for that. Every time the devil said something you did, Jesus said, I paid for that. So the judge asked him, Jesus, how did you pay for it? He said, well, one day you sit me down, put me in a manger in a town called Bethlehem. Born of the virgin, yeah, wrapped in swaddling clothes. After I left there, I found a way to turn water into wine. After I left there, yeah, I made a lame man run. After I left there, I found a woman with the issue of blood, and I told her her faith would make her whole. I told her if she believed in me, she would be alright. And so I got to tell you how it paid for you. I got to tell you how it paid for me. Through your mind, if I tell you how it did, one Thursday night, and a God called me Missionary. He got down on the knees, yeah, he started to pray. He said, Father, if any way is possible, let this cup pass away from me. What he was really saying is, if anything else could be done to prevent me from dying, to save an ungodly world, allow it to happen. And the good news is, at the end of his prayer, said, not my will. Yeah! But your will, Lord. He left there, and guess what happened? They marched him from drug and hall to family hall. They beat him with 40 lashes. Lord, and I got good news. He said, by his stripes, you are healed. 40 times they beat Jesus. 40 times they put him in his back. 40 times they put him on his side. 40 times they put him in his head. Why? Because he was standing over you. He was standing over me. But the Lord said, the way to the sin is death. So the Lord was what they beat him with. Why? Because you were messed up and I was messed up. But the good news is, after they beat him, they crowned him in his hair with thorns. Yeah! After they crowned him, they put a cross on his back and they marched him up Calvary Hill under Via Dolorosa. That's the road to suffering. When they got him up there, they found some more stuff that you did. When they got him up there, they found some more stuff that I did. So they nailed him in his hand, nailed him in his feet. But guess what they did? They messed up. They made one mistake because they should have nailed him and left him laying on the ground. They should have put ribbons in his feet and left him laying on the ground. But when they lifted the cross up, the cripple was fulfilled when he said, if I be lifted up, I'll draw all men unto me. I tell you, I've been happy about it because when Jesus was lifted up, his death was removed. When Jesus was lifted up, his death was removed. He died. He died until the sun refused to shine. He died until the moon dripped down in blood. He died until the earth began to quake. And the good news is he died can go to the preacher, because the preacher ain't righteous, but I can go to God for myself and say, Father, have mercy, have mercy on me. He died unto the centurion, told the dead, surely Jesus he, the Son of God. Ain't he alright? Ain't he alright? But don't read the text, because the text said that if that happened by his death, what more will happen by his life? They laid him in a barley tree. Barley mean you got to give it back one day. Laid him in a tomb that wasn't his. Friday night, he laid in the tomb. Saturday morning came, laid in the tomb. Saturday night came, he was still laying there. But I got good news for you. You ready for some good news? Early Sunday morning, he got up on the resurrection ground. He has saved you from a burn in hell. All you gotta do is say that you believe. If you believe in your heart and confess it with your mouth, you will be saved. Before I go, can I ask you a question? Do you believe that he died? Do you believe that he was buried? Do you believe that he rose again? If you believe, shall I believe? One more time, the angels sing to hear. Shall I believe? The brother didn't hear you. One more time, shall I believe? I dare you to turn to your neighbor, grab him by the hand, shake him and rock him and shake him. Say, neighbor, you need to believe. If you believe in Jesus, he will take care of you. He's not the same for every time. God will take care of you. And if he please, oh Lord, God will take care of you. Do you know it's all right? I said, do you know it's all right? Do you know it's all right? I'm talking about Jesus. There was David, the Son of God, the Lamb who was slain for me, the Lamb for Sharon, the King of Kings, the great I am, the lily in the valley, the bright and morning star. I'm talking about Jesus, the bread of life. Yeah, I'm talking about Jesus. If you know Jesus and you believe, so yeah, yeah, yeah. That's real love. See, when you think about real love demands a response. But grandmama would say, anytime somebody do something for you, you are obligated to tell them thank you. See, the issue is people praise when the music stops.
Come on now.
But your gratefulness is determined by how much you can praise him and thank him when ain't no music playing. Your gratefulness is determined with how you can lift your hands and tell the Lord, thank you, Lord. You've been good. You've been good. One more time, if you've never been good. So yeah. First an invitation.